Hey guys, Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time around we had Full Circle. What was that one about?
Well, I guess it's best to say it's kind of a interesting take on evolution with maybe a little bit of, Chariots of the Gods thrown in right at the end. They land on a planet, which the first couple of minutes it looks like it's basically, New Stone Age, Neolithic type. But then they talk about the mist or the fog or something that's coming up, and everybody needs to get into the Starliner, and you're going, what the heck? These people don't know how to build spaceships. But then you find out that they think they are descendants of the people who built the Starliner. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. Ultimately, you find out that the Starliner landed on the planet, but then the three different versions of the inhabitants or whatever ended up wiping out the people who crash landed, and then somehow or other began to think that they were descendants of them when they were. Anyway, it was an interesting story with, not the greatest story ever, but it was interesting.
Yeah, certainly the most interesting story we've had this season between this, Meglos, and the Leisure Hive. So, and it was also the introduction to Adric as well.
Yes.
Who... Technically, we didn't fully have him joining the TARDIS team, but they left it open enough to where he can easily stow away, and he'll just be a part of the next story, which I assume that's what we're going with today. State of Decay.
That's where we live.
Yeah, so... anywho. But yeah, so we're still in E-Space, by the way. The Doctor was ordered to return to Gallifrey, but I guess that's just not happening anytime soon. Maybe that'll be the end of the season, or maybe not. I don't know, because at some point, I hate to say it like this, but at some point we have to ditch Romana and, or at least leave her behind, have her go off and do something else that's probably in a Big Finish audio somewhere that... the more time goes on, the less I want to get into Big Finish audios, because there's so many of them. It's like it's too daunting. It's like trying to get into classic Doctor Who in the first place, except it's times 10. It's too much.
Well, if you weren't doing anything else, but how many other videos do you do besides classic Doctor Who?
Well, let's see. On Sundays, I have Demon Slayer. Monday is Doctor Who. Tuesday, I've been doing the Bad Batch recently, the second season of Bad Batch. Sometimes I do movies on Tuesday. Wednesday is now for the new season of The Mandalorian. Thursday is JoJo and Mob Psycho 100. Friday is Broadchurch. I just started One Piece reviews on Saturday. So probably a little too much. So, and there's just... But at least with all of that, even with... because the last thing I said, One Piece, which I just started reading, there's over 1,000 chapters of One Piece.
Yikes.
It's been running since 1997, actually, but even that is still manageable because there's at least a start point. Chapter 1. I don't know where to start with Big Finish, especially because even if you find, something like, even if I wanted to say, all right, I'm going to do the Ninth Doctor audios. Well, which versions do you go with? Do you go with the older versions, which was someone else playing the Ninth Doctor? Or do you go with the more recent ones, where they finally got Christopher Eccleston back as the Ninth Doctor? I think, the closest you can do for Big Finish, if you're trying to get into it, is to go with the Eighth Doctor. Because there is nothing else about that Doctor that you really need to know other than the movie to get into those. Yeah. So that's the most tempting spot. But still, it's all a matter of time, and I just started reading One Piece, and it's probably too much. So, anywho. State of Decay. I don't know. It's another adventure in E-Space, I guess.
Now, this is episodes 13, 14, 15, and 16, which means we're roughly halfway through this season. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. If it's still about a 26 episode season, I think.
Yeah.
So I think technically we have a higher number of stories this season, but that's only because they're not doing the 6-parters anymore. So I think this season wraps out with 7 stories, but I mean, this is the 4th story of the season, so either way, it's pretty much the halfway point.
So we're coming to the end of the Tom Baker era.
Yeah, which I know I sort of teased. Nobody talked about this in the comments, which I found interesting. But I know I teased that maybe we would do a live stream or something. Maybe we'll just have it be a regular video where we just talk about it all. And that's not even because, like, oh, I'm scared of what Doctor Who fans will say in real time. But it just sounds like it would be easier. Just basically, we would take a week off from the reactions. We would just sit down, talk about all the episodes. The other thing I have been suggested is between this season and next season, they actually aired the spin-off K9 and Company, which is K9 and Sarah Jane. And it lasted for 1 episode before it got canceled. But I've actually reacted to that episode before, and I thought it was actually pretty good. So honestly, we could even do that before we move on to the 5th Doctor. So, but yeah, other than that, that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right, then why don't we go ahead and jump into State of Decay.
Somebody was commenting about how they enjoyed this one more. I think the reason I like the old one, seriously, I like the William Hartnell one, is because it sounds less like they were trying to make it into, a hummable tune. It really was just, a theme, a background sort of, feeling emotion.
Well,
this is Rapunzel's castle
in space.
I wonder if this is the same set from that first Santaran.
Increase the food allowance,
Maybe.
you'd get better results.
No, we were just wondering if there were any other scientists.
Scientists?
Yes, scientists, Witch wiggler, wangateur, fortune teller, Mundanugu.
Oh, such things are forbidden. We know nothing of them here. If my lord will excuse me, my duties.
Yes.
Well, at least they're being treated well.
Galma, can you hear me? 2 strangers. Here, in the village. That's right, strangers. They were asking about scientists.
Your expedition is dangerous and unnecessary.
Listen, K9, I'm a stowaway. I shouldn't be here at all.
Correct.
Then the sooner I leave, the better.
The conclusion is logical.
Go get yourself killed.
Doctor, look. Say something.
Hello. I'm the Doctor, and this is Romana.
We're druids.
Look.
That looks like the path in Mask of the Mandragora.
I don't know how you remember this stuff. The Sacred Commodore 64.
Well, it's quite a technocotheca you've got here.
Doctor? What's a technocotheca?
I don't know, I think it's some sort of museum.
Look at their faces.
A chap in the village told me the Lord's protected you from the wasting.
Know about the wasting?
Well, only by hearsay. What is the wasting?
The wasting?
Yes.
The wasting is... The wasting.
Very descriptive.
This is a very kind of weird parallel to what actually happened. Remember, the Greeks and the Romans had huge amounts of technology that were then lost after the fall of the empire. And again, it literally took 1,000 years for Europe to get back to it. However, the Arabic world, the Persians and their descendants, were way ahead of the Europeans at this point. In fact, it was the Arabs that were literally responsible for the Renaissance.
Well, if I'm staying.
Good job, Adric. Rule 1. Survive.
You wouldn't have any cheese, would you? Please? Never mind.
Can't live in a world without cheese.
Yeah, I honestly relate to that line. You gotta give me some cheese.
Now we'll find out something. Oh, must have been out of guarantee. Instruction manual would be helpful. Back on 20th century Earth, the engineers used to just...
Oh, there you go.
Definitely an Earth device.
Would you like to play a game?
Manifest and cargo, flight plan from Earth. So it is Earth.
Wait, it's a long way away from Kansas.
I was a tower guard before I joined Coma. I saw them every day. That doesn't say it can't be.
Who did you see every day?
The three who rule. The king, his queen,
That's two.
and AUKON, the counselor.
Well, in theory,
The Doctor's going to turn into a vampire?
I think the lords might be vampires. That's why they're 1,000 years old. I suddenly remembered there's supposed to be a Doctor Who story about vampires at some point.
I wonder if those are like on fishing poles and wire.
Probably. I like how Romana says, too, that the nighttime doesn't seem natural. Because it's clear that they didn't shoot this at night. Oh, jeez. Let it go for a sec.
Emrys, that's a good Welsh name.
Alright, so it just it all suddenly rushed back to me. Because I remember I made a joke years ago on some other reaction, and someone was like, well, actually there's a Fourth Doctor story that has vampires in it, actually. And I just forgot about that until this very moment where it's they've been alive for 1,000 years at least, and there's a lot of bats around here. It was right when he got nicked by the one bat that I was like, wait a minute, this is all starting to come together now. So,
yes, that would make sense if they are a mission from Earth that got crossed over into E-space, crash landed on this planet, figured out how to stay alive by essentially the Chosen, where they take the blood of the young people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all right, that makes perfect sense, and that's very intriguing. This is an interesting start.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting too because I've had this story in my head of just a vampire that travels through space and goes on wacky adventures, basically. So now to have basically sort of like that, it would sort of be a sort of Doctor Who-esque show of, just take the Doctor, but now he is a vampire, and then you just do that. But now we have the Doctor, because I think there was something, I don't think it's this story, but I think there's a non-canon story, or non-canon story, like a comic or a book or something, where the Doctor actually defeats the king of all vampires in space. So, and I think that was one of the big wars, before the Time War between the Time Lords and the Daleks, there was the Great Time War between the Time Lords and the vampires, which that needs to be put to film at some point. That sounds like a lot of fun, honestly. So yeah, I was not expecting this, but I'm very intrigued.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, because about 21 minutes on that episode, that went by really fast, I felt like.
Yeah.
So, Now, if this really is vampires, all we need to do is bring back the brain of Morbius, and it'll be the perfect Jared Leto crossover.
Now, the other thing on the bats there is, are they actually flying them in front of the camera in, real time, or are they being superimposed after being green screened?
I don't know.
Funny about the windows.
What windows?
Yes, and then there's the general architectural style. Would you call it Rococo?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, the funny thing about the windows is there are none.
Just testing a theory.
Doctor?
Yes?
Oh yeah, those two are vampires. Look at them.
Greetings, how do you do?
I'd say this is about
We know who you are.
Earth time period, late 1100s, early 1200s.
What we do not know is why you...
This is nothing. It's a tiny cut. You've hurt yourself. Let me see, please. Let me see. Really, there's no need to make such a fuss over a few drops of blood.
Doctor, you still have not told us why you came here.
Bad luck, mostly.
I didn't notice his beard has multiple curls on the ends of it. That's awesome.
Interesting. A mind that shields itself. One who pretends to be a dull and stupid peasant, but who is different.
Who, me?
Adric couldn't hide his mathematical excellence from him.
We shall resume this later. If you need anything, there are guards outside the door.
Very well choreographed.
Many guards.
What were those Hydrax officers called?
Captain Miles Sharkey, Navigation Officer Lauren McMillan, Science Officer Anthony O'Connor.
AUKON.
That's very good.
Such a handsome child.
I will take him to be prepared. Come.
Was he hypnotized off screen? Like, he's not really putting up a resistance anymore.
I think he was hypnotized in that scene.
Find them, Hebris, or you shall go to feed the Great One. Search the tower. Search the lands around.
Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil.
You're
Maybe.
wrong.
Fuel tanks aren't disused. Only this isn't rocket fuel. It's blood.
The ship is a vampire.
Where are we, Doctor?
You are in the resting place. Where? The resting place. I am AUKON. Welcome to my domain.
Alrighty. I'm curious, because they mentioned the fact that there's no windows in the tower. I guess that could also just be because it's a spaceship. I immediately thought, oh, well, they're vampires. They don't want sunlight. Although, if I'm right, it wasn't until... Wasn't it the Nosferatu movie that invented sunlight as a weakness?
No, if I recall... Now, it's been many, many years. Probably 25, 30 years since I've read the novel Dracula. I read it before I played Professor Van Helsing. But I think that's actually in the Bram Stoker novel. I don't know if that was part of the legend before, with Vlad the Impaler and all that. But I think that is part of it, because in the novel he comes to Carfax Abbey only at night. So,
Yeah, I guess that could be. So, but yeah, it's interesting. I do kind of wish I hadn't remembered that there were supposed to be vampires at some point, because that would be a really crazy reveal that they are vampires. Although, I mean, as soon as the bats show up, I think you could easily piece it together. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm now curious about what the Great One is, because there's also the question of how did these humans become vampires in the first place. So and it's also interesting that he says every inhabited planet has some sort of legend about vampires. Yeah. So it just kind of makes me want to see vampires on different planets, all the way up to, and I want to believe this is something that could be done today as one of the dumbest episodes of Doctor Who. I want to see vampire Daleks, because that just sounds amazing. I mean, they should be fine because they have the casing, so they don't have to worry about sunlight. But then that's also the question of, what do you do about beheading or stabbing them through the heart? How do you defeat a Dalek that has even less weaknesses?
Vampire Cybermen would kind of make more sense, but you're right. That would
Which I do remember. I was watching a video that was talking about all of the different weaknesses that vampires have gained over the years and stuff, and it's like, man, vampires suck nowadays because there's too many things. And it's like, oh, if they're decapitated, well, I don't know about you, but if somebody cut my head off, I don't think I would live either. So, and I think like one of the bigger complaints is that like silver, I think in a lot of different things silver goes, and it's like, well, wasn't that supposed to just be werewolves though?
Yeah, but part of the thing about taking the head off is because they're already dead. They are undead, and to prevent them from reviving themselves, you have to disassemble their body. Yeah, why a wooden stake through the heart? They also, again, most of the crucifixes are made of silver. Press that against their head and it would burn them. That sort of, I don't know. But yeah, there's a whole huge amount of vampire lore.
That's also another interesting point is, because they're undead, they're unholy. So having a holy image should also work. It's interesting because I've reacted to two different things that sort of have vampires. One of them is in the early days of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. One of the main JoJo's Bizarre Adventure starts off as this sort of it's a story in Victorian England of these two brothers who were competing with each other. They don't really like each other, and so they're constantly competing. By the end of the second episode, one of the brothers becomes a vampire, and now you just have to deal with that in the story. But the only weakness that he has is sunlight. So there are specific tribes of warriors that have invented sunlight magic to where they can even at night generate a sort of sunlight energy. So that's one way of doing it. Or right now I'm watching Demon Slayer, which they're not vampires per se. They're more just different types of Japanese demons, but they're practically vampires. They burn in the sunlight, they eat humans and everything, but the only other way to kill them is decapitation with a specific sword. And it's actually interesting, one of the more recent episodes had a demon cutting his own head off before the sword cut him. Therefore, he was able to just, get up, walk over like the Black Knight. It's only a scratch, and he popped his head back on. So, I don't think we're going to get any of that in this episode. No. That would be hilarious to watch Tom Baker decapitating a dude in Doctor Who.
There are echoes of that in the film and the TV series Highlander, of cutting the guy's head off and then taking their power from them, if I recall correctly. It's been a while again.
Yeah.
Now, that last little thing, though, there with AUKON, and we saw it before with Adric, that is one of the powers in Bram Stoker's Dracula, is that the Count has the ability to get people to do what he wants through a kind of hypnotic or mesmerism type effect.
Yeah. Which is interesting that now we've brought in, vampires to Doctor Who have all these powers, when we technically already had that, and he was called the Master. He just didn't burn in the sunlight, but other than that, he was very Dracula-esque. Yeah. So, and there was also a shot. I'm curious if they're going to stick with the whole sunlight weakness as well, because there was the shot of AUKON going into the village, and he would have been in sunlight at that point. So, I don't know.
I will not serve. Come,
You'd think he'd be immune to this, because he can do this.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Hold on, never mind.
Smack him with a tlat. Oh!
Aw.
Eyes, Romana. That might be all right for half-starved peasantry, AUKON, but it doesn't scare Time Lords.
Time Lords, the ancient enemies.
The ancient enemies.
Always so anxious to leave, Doctor.
Okay.
I guess the guards don't question it.
His spirit will be one with ours. Come, we must rest. And when we wake, we shall feed.
Why am I still afraid?
Screw your courage to the sticking post, Macbeth.
And they were so strong that one single vampire could suck the life out of an entire planet.
One single vampire could suck the life out of an entire planet.
Yes.
Rubbish.
Well, he wasn't a scientist. There are other ways of looking at life, you know. Anyway, according to the story, we Time Lords hunted them down across the universe in a war so long and so bloody that we were sick of violence forever.
So they were all destroyed.
One of them escaped, I think.
This is why the Time Lords stopped doing stuff.
Oh, that. Oh, misty dawn of history. When even Rassilon was young.
That was a long time ago.
I once worked in the Bureau of Ancient Records. A copy of the book was to be installed in certain time vehicles.
What time vehicles?
Oh, I don't know, I forget.
What time vehicles?
Type 40, I think.
How very convenient.
Well, it's an old school type.
The TARDIS is a Type 40.
Is it?
Psst. You are wonderful.
Me? Wonderful. I suppose I am. Never really thought about it.
Good job. Ow.
I'm not like that.
Just a minute, who are you?
Do you know the Lady Camilla?
Oh, of course.
I just happen to be her blood group separator.
What?
Camilla is also a name used in a lot of, I think, 60s and 70s lady vampire movies.
Well,
Try your folklore section.
My folklore section contains vampire lore from 17 inhabited planets. I will begin with Earth, the legend of Count Dracula.
No, thank you. Not Dracula. Emergency instructions.
There are 18,348 emergency instructions.
It's not a wooden stake, Tarak. We're supposed to be looking for Adric, remember?
I mean, you could try to cut their heads off, though. You know who would have done that? Leela would have done that.
Take a while with a knife.
Meh.
Record of Rassilon.
Ah,
Oh, good.
it's a physical book. That's the problem.
The old punch
Record of
cards.
Rassilon.
Alright, so I guess I accidentally spoiled that that A, it's vampires, and B, that the Doctor defeats the Vampire King. That's my bad. I thought that was like pre this, I guess. So doesn't matter. I mean, okay, spoilers, the Doctor saves the day, I guess. You know, that's a spoiler for all Doctor Who episodes basically, but still, it's a really interesting, good story.
Yeah.
So
I would say this is probably the best one since City of Death.
yeah. So, it's slightly interesting because having Adric here, I mean, I know that Adric is not really a favored companion of the Doctor. I will say it's funny that now that Adric is here, the stories have gotten way better this season. Mainly just because the Leisure Hive was kind of weird and Meglos was just kind of boring. And then now we have these, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. You know, Full Circle was interesting, if a little convoluted, but it was interesting. And this one, it's like, oh, vampires, cool, I can get behind that. So,
the rocket ship, a great bolt of steel.
Well,
Lack of weapons, no experience, odds almost insurmountable. But he who outlives this day and comes safe home shall stand a tiptoe when this day is named and rouse them at the name of E-Space.
Henry V.
Well, that's the problem. There's going to be an answer. What? That's the question. You're not sleeping, my friends. Now we're going into X-ray. Watch the area below the tower.
oh, he's a big man bat.
I'm sorry, Time Lady. One of my families died for your lot already. I reckon one's enough.
Adric, do you know what happens to vampires when they die?
But they don't die. Do they, AUKON?
But they did.
Release him and prepare him for the ceremony.
I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that this is all Adric's plan, but at the same time, I think they're going to regret making him a vampire really quickly.
Of course. An arrow of steel. And I've been looking at it all this time. Right, gentlemen, let's gather around and finalize our plans now. We need a group of your best men, a sort of commando form.
You lead us then, Doctor?
Yes! No! Oh, well, all right. I've got other things to worry about, but...
That's a Monty Python moment.
Yeah.
Make the most of your death scene there, guard.
But I like he specifically fell and then turned over so the K9 could go through.
I was wondering when they were going to put her in a
Can you hear me?
dress. What did he say?
I don't know.
The guards must hold the tower to the last man.
We are outnumbered. Unless you aid us, we shall all be killed.
Then die. That is the purpose of guards. Go.
Time to rethink your entire life.
Well,
We shall be invincible.
I'm assuming the Great One will arise right over and then wham. Oh, this is gonna be awkward. Well, good shot. Well, that's convenient. They're so broken. It's good makeup, though.
Yeah. Television, that was pretty good effects.
Well,
Is there any way out of this E-space? Perhaps one day we can get back to Earth.
Well, I really don't know. You see, we came here by accident. But you were brought here by the great vampire's brain. And his secret died with him. Such good luck.
Thank you.
You, young man, you're going straight home. You're going straight back to the Starlight.
Alrighty. You know, that was sort of one lingering question. I was like, who are the villagers anyway? But I guess they were just also on the ship.
Descendants of the passengers, I guess.
Yeah, they just didn't... They didn't become vampires like the crew. So... Alrighty. The Doctor faces Dracula. And he won.
Now, again, I've said this many times, the best thing they did there at the end was not to show the great flappy vampire that they showed on the screen, just that one giant hand coming up. That makes it a lot scarier than seeing the great flappy vampire.
Yeah, so yeah, an interesting story, definitely. And then at the end, it's like, well, it's unfortunate we kind of have to leave these people here. Might never get back to Earth. You know, it's also weird that this story and the last story are very eerily similar. Of like, you know, there's the descendants of the people who have been here for thousands of years on this planet, and there's some sort of strange monster and stuff. But I mean, it's obviously very different from swamp dudes to vampires. but it's just sort of strange back to back.
Yeah.
But either way, I mean, I guess that begs the question: what is E-space? I guess, you know, because they say it's a relatively small world or a small universe. So I don't know, and I guess the Adric and his people, and then the people that they thought they were, I guess those must be natives to E-space, whereas obviously all the villagers here and the vampires were originally from Earth. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I guess there could be 20,000 questions about E-space. Don't need them all answered, obviously, but that's fine. It's just sort of an interesting... It's an interesting story arc that we found ourselves in this season, especially for it being like the middle of the season. Like the first two stories didn't really have anything to do with E-space. So yeah. What was the wasting? They say it's like, oh, we protect the villagers from the wasting. What was that?
Yeah, they never did explain that.
No, because that's like pretty much the first note I have on here. I was like, wait a minute, that was a thing, but that wasn't a thing. Like, I'm not really, I don't know. I guess it was just a lie perpetuated.
Yeah, trying to keep them under control. Maybe like saying that there's, you know, didn't they mention there was going to be a time where the crops would fail and that sort of thing? So maybe that was it. Maybe, like you said, it's just a way to frighten them with this event that would keep them under control.
Yeah, and that's also how nobody questions why there aren't other villages anywhere. It's just this one village and this one tower, and that's it. So I guess that's it. But they kind of, I guess it's just because they said it a couple times, they kind of made it a bigger deal that I was kind of waiting for, like, well, what is the wasting? But yeah, it's probably just a way of keeping them under control.
A way of wasting our time trying to figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. So it's, you know, it's also just a very interesting thing of, you know, explaining, you know, all the lore on the Time Lords is very interesting. I like how now one of the big things in the lore of the Time Lords is vampires. And I want to know who thought of that. And also just the fact that I'm curious if that will ever really come up again. I guess the video where we were kind of talking about vampires, I guess that would have been when we listened to Damaged Goods. You remember that one?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, because that whole thing was, there was a sort of vampirism happening, although this is very traditional suck your blood kind of vampires. Yeah. But they do say there was a vampire, I guess the king of the vampires, who could, you know, suck a planet dry all by himself, you know? So I guess that's sort of it, is that the lower, I guess these are just lower tier vampires, the three of them, and they were humans who were made vampires. Yeah. So I guess that brings up the idea that, well, I guess these vampires they must have just been vampires on that planet.
Yeah.
So
because as we know, not all bats are vampire bats.
Yeah. So, see, now I'm just trying to think, like, how many Morbius jokes can I make in terms of this? I don't know. So, see, it's almost a waste because I already used Morbius in the thumbnail of The Brain of Morbius. So, that was a terrible movie, wasn't it? It's hilarious. It's one of those.
Watch it.
Well, yes, it's something you gotta see. It's like watching. I don't know. I was gonna say The Room. I don't think either of us have seen The Room, but I've seen clips of The Room, or something like we reacted to Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. That reaction is on the channel. If you can't find it, it might be blocked in your country. Don't worry. Hit me up on Twitter or something. I'll send you a link to it. But that was magical. So, so when you get modern terrible movies, sometimes you gotta watch it for the meme, But this is not like that because this was actually a good thing.
Before I forget this, and I kind of mentioned it while we were watching. Zargo and Camilla.
Yeah.
I mentioned how they look very well choreographed and everything. That is right in tune with the old Hammer films and everything like that. The very stylized, even the makeup, but the how they moved together and did all that stuff. That is either a direct ripoff or an homage, if you will, to all of those wonderful vampire films of the late 50s and early 60s, and I guess into the 70s.
Yeah. Of course, now we're into the 80s.
Yeah.
So, which is interesting also, just like, because I think someone said, I can't remember which part of it is that, wasn't it now with the new showrunner? I always have to put that in quotes, or else people are going to have a heart attack in the comments, but the new showrunner, JNT, didn't he want Doctor Who to be more serious?
I think so, yeah.
I think that was it. I always get confused, like, wait, was it more goofy or was it more serious? So, which, honestly, goofier Tom Baker stuff kind of works a bit better, like when they sort of, especially when they go into more of that Monty Python-esque style. So, it's interesting now with this whole, new techno theme. We're in the new age of sci-fi and stuff like that, and we got a very classical sort of vampire story. It's in space, but it's a very medieval village, and these lords, but they're actually vampires and stuff, and it's sort of an odd combination, basically. So, but still, so yeah, it's also interesting because wasn't Zargo supposed to be the captain as well? But it's definite that AUKON was the one in charge. I guess just because I would imagine then that he must have been the first one of them who was turned into a vampire. Yeah. So he has that connection to the Great One. They never gave the King of the Vampires a name. I was kind of waiting for that. So, but yeah. And I do like the, I guess the juxtaposition of this very medieval culture, and you get the peasants and stuff like that, and then you walk into a cave and there's an old CRT and an old really clicky keyboard and stuff like that, which is also very indicative of the TARDIS too, because it's like, oh yes, all this great technology that the Doctor has, and he has to put in a little card, and he gets the the thing, the readout, and it's like, yes, this is what this book says. So, but I really did enjoy that. And then just the whole idea that even though they've been suppressing these people, just to make sure they're all in line so they can keep them keep them alive long enough to sacrifice some of them to the Great One and stuff. But immediately there were those who were basically rebelling against them, and they kept the knowledge, how to use some of these machines, how to turn it on, how to read and everything. Like, that's really interesting. And then but again, that as I was saying before,
that's exactly what happened. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe descended into chaos. All of that information was lost. People were no longer learning how to read. Of course, it was kept alive by the Christian church at that time, the Catholic Church. But again, in the Middle East, it was the Persians and the Arabs of North Africa who were consolidating a lot of that. And ultimately, when the seafaring cities, the Genoas and the Venices and places like that, began to trade with the Persians and the Arabs, that all that knowledge finally came back to Europe, which allowed for the Renaissance. So that's very similar to what's going on here. So again, it's just, there's a lot of great historical touches here that are very subtle but very much appreciated.
Yeah, which, again, because we've said this 10,000 times, and I know what the answer is. I know what they're going to put in the comments. But why can't Doctor Who do more stuff like this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's not a historical, because a historical is going back in time on Earth. We see maybe historical figures, but generally just historical places and stuff. That's all great, and that's fine. And you can throw an alien in there. We'll take that too. But here, it's historic-ish, you know? It's very much, you know, it's building on that sort of, you know, Dark Ages, which will eventually lead into a Renaissance. It's that in space, E-space specifically, and it's about space vampires who fought the Time Lords, you know? Why can't we have more of that, you know? It's sort of the thing, like, and I know we also bring up Star Trek all the time, but it's like how, you know, you'd get some episodes where, like in the original series of Star Trek, it's like, well, they find this planet where this Starfleet admiral is like, you know what, the Nazis had a good idea, so he makes this whole Nazi regime on this planet, and you know the reason is because they had some leftover Nazi uniforms, you know, on the lot, and it's like, oh, well, we can make this episode, you know, really easily, and it's still an enjoyable episode of Star Trek. So I would imagine some of that is still here, where it's like, yeah, maybe they had to build all these sets and stuff like that, but I'm sure the BBC had medieval costumes laying around. Just put in some makeup around the eyes to distinguish the vampires, get some curly beards and stuff, and you're all good. Why can't you do that more often? It's fun, you know? So, but yeah, it's episodes like this, or like Mask of the Mandragora and stuff like that, where it's like, man, these are just really interesting. You have aliens, yes, but it's still very interesting. Yeah. So,
and was it the Sontaran Experiment? What's the first one? That was Warrior, Time Warrior.
Yeah, the Time Warrior.
Yeah, those are...
That was a really good episode, too.
That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, so we'll be ranking those very highly when we do our tier list of Tom Baker episodes. You know, I thought about that, too. If we do a specific tier list and we put each episode into different tiers, you know, a standard tier list would have, you know, really great, and it would, you know, go all the way down to the awful category. I don't know if we're actually going to get like that low, honestly. So it may not be the most exciting tier list in the world. So yeah, this story also works out. I know this is not catching on the microphone, but it is pouring down rain outside, and there's occasional thunder, and somehow that just enhances the mood of a vampire story. So, let's see.
Yeah, and here in Oklahoma, it's about 40 degrees today. It's supposed to be 90 degrees tomorrow.
Yep. So
Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
not centigrade.
Yeah.
Or Celsius.
Yeah. So bust out your jacket and then promptly put it away with great disdain the next day. So yeah, let's see. So I guess, at first I thought that the ship, I jokingly said the ship is also a vampire. I thought the ship itself ran on blood. Yeah. But I guess not. It's just that the fuel in the fuel canisters had blood because they were, you know, bringing all of that to the Great One.
Apparently that's the vampire's name. He's just called the Great One.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just kind of wish, you know, like something like Dracula or Carmilla or some sort of big vampire name, because you're also putting that against his main adversary in the past, which was Rassilon, which is already, a dope name. So you put the two together, and it's like, come on, you gotta have a cool name to balance that out, But
Alucard.
Yeah.
Isn't that what
There's a lot of stuff that uses Alucard. I think like the first one was Son of Dracula, where I think the plot twist was just he was Dracula, just his disguise was being called Alucard. But there's a lot of stuff, Castlevania, the Helsing shows and stuff, a lot of stuff uses Alucard. Yeah. So, and a lot of times too, or sometimes too, they'll also just have Alucard being the name of Dracula's specific son, like actual son. Yeah. So yeah. It would be interesting. I know they kind of dismissed the idea of Dracula. When K9 was like, "Oh, the story of Dracula, I'll recount it," and he's like, "No, not Dracula." It's like, it would be hilarious if you just had Dracula in an episode, So I don't know. You can if you did that nowadays, I don't know, get Nicolas Cage to do that. I actually saw that. I think the Renfield movie is coming to digital soon, actually. Cool. Which I thought that just came out in theaters. So either they have no faith in it, or they just said, "Screw it, we'll just put it on, streaming anyway." So, let's see. Well, we did have the whole thing with the Bolt just being part of the ship, the scout ship, just going all the way up and coming all the way down and stabbing him, which I did enjoy that. It works because it's like you said, they don't show the Great One, which we've seen some Doctor Who monsters that we were like, well, I wish we hadn't seen that.
Flappy Bird.
Yeah. So, but I will say it is also just funny not seeing him. You just see this hand, and then you just see this giant stick, basically just come down and pierce him. So that was kind of funny. But I like how they also say that they just can absorb any energy from like an energy weapon. It's like, you're making sure that K9 can't just do something, which this whole season, like, this is the most K9 has done all season. So I think Terrence Dix made sure it's like, no, we have to have something with K9. So, because at that point, if you don't want K9 in the show, don't have K9 in the show. Just have him. He exploded at the beginning of the season. You could have just left him like that, I guess. I don't know. Maybe the kids wouldn't have liked that. And then, we got everything with the last thing is basically just all the lore with the Time Lords and the Great Vampire Wars. It's quite the difference, too, from going to the Time Lord's greatest enemy is vampires to the Time Lord's greatest enemy are pepper pots in space. Both are also ridiculous, but I love how the Doctor also said that the Time Lords were so traumatized by the war that they never took up violence or anything like that again. It's like, oh, that's why they are the way they are. They're just the observers. Except, occasionally we'll send the Doctor, but we wash our hands of it now. So
plausible deniability.
Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it. Of course, this whole discussion, we didn't talk about Adric at all. All right, I'm glad, I kind of figured he was bluffing them, that he wasn't actually going to go with the vampires. I will say, though, I'm starting to see a little bit of why he's not necessarily a fan favorite. He's kind of an annoying kid. So, and, it's always the thing, too, of once you get a new companion, you really start to appreciate the last companion you had. Because, like, as soon as we got the second Romana, I was like, well, I really like the first Romana, and now she's gone, and now we have Adric, and it's like, I really like this new Romana. It's always like, I'm always too late in really liking a companion, so, oh well. Except for, like, Jamie. Jamie's the only one, like, out the gate, you're like, yeah, this guy's pretty good, so. I'm assuming you have nothing else?
I got nothing.
Alright, next up is Warrior's Gate. Okay. These titles are getting way more interesting. So, even this one, they vaguely reference, well, they say the state of decay, but I mean that works. The vampires, undead, all that sort of thing. Yeah. So I'm enjoying these titles a lot more. But yeah, that is basically it. With all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around any of those. There's a playlist for all of our Doctor Who Classic reactions, as well as another playlist for all of my modern Doctor Who reactions if you want to go check those out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.